From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Friday, March 28th. Democrat Melissa Fireside came out of nowhere in November to win a key election in Oregon's third most populous county. But the Clackamas County Commissioner's sudden rise came with an even quicker downfall, following numerous felony charges the Oregon Department of Justice announced earlier this month. It's just the latest change on a county board that's seen the political pendulum go back and forth many times in the past decade. Settle in, turn up your volume. It's time for a fireside chat. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB politics reporter Lauren Dake.
And I'm OPB Justice and Legal Affairs reporter Conrad Wilson.
Conrad, let's talk about Melissa Fireside. Who is she? How did she get into politics?
So Fireside is a small business owner, and while she had experience on some policy and advisory committees that focused on mental health and addiction, compensation for elected county officials, she was really a political newcomer and relatively unknown. During her campaign for Clackamas County, Fireside picked up some key endorsements, though. Democrats in Clackamas County really lauded her, and as someone who had the pulse of the business community, calling her a fighter that would kind of work for everybody. And really the thing that boosted her profile was the person that she was running against.
Yeah, let's talk about him. She ousted Mark Scholl, and he served just one term on the board. And sort of similar to Fireside, he was in pretty hot water shortly after entering public office.
Correct. So Fireside, as you pointed out, ousted Commissioner Scholl, and really more than once, he was a source of very divisive, offensive rhetoric. For example, in 2021, not long after he was elected, Scholl faced widespread calls for his resignation after social media posts he made in 2019 and 2020 surfaced. He made offensive remarks against immigrants, the Black Lives Matter movement, people who are transgender and Muslims. And then during the COVID-19 pandemic, he compared vaccine passports to Jim Crow laws, Nazi Germany, and the Holocaust. But Scholl, a Republican, refused to resign and remained on the commission until he was ousted in November by Fireside.
So clearly voters were hoping for some change on the commission and somebody maybe not tied to all these controversies. But not long after she was elected, we began to learn that Fireside was facing potential legal issues.
That's right. So on March 5th, Melissa Fireside appeared in court on an 8-count felony indictment. The charges ranged from theft to identity theft to forgery. And, when you look at the court documents, there wasn't, they provided a lot of information, but they didn't really say a ton about what was going on. The Department of Justice is prosecuting the case, and they kind of filled in some more details. And what we were able to piece together is that it involved an elderly man, a lot of money. Fireside was using to pay back a loan to a state representative. The charges really upset Commissioner Fireside's colleagues. Clackamas County Commissioner Ben West, a Republican, spoke at a public meeting just after Fireside was charged, saying the public expects their officials to act ethically.
I believe that Commissioner Fireside is incapable of doing that, and she has broken that trust, and she has now put the trust of this board with the public in jeopardy also. I've already done this formally, but here on this dais today, I call for her formal resignation swiftly and immediately, now.
And it wasn't just Republicans who were upset. Commissioner Martha Schrader, a Democrat, also expressed deep concern.
These allegations are terribly serious, and it's going to have to go through a judicial process to prove innocence or guilt. But I would request that Commissioner Fireside, if she is not, I agree with Commissioner West, if she is taking a leave, it should be a leave without pay.
Glenda Shear is a resident in Gladstone, and she sort of summed up what was a very ruckus public meeting with these comments.
Melissa Fireside is a distraction, plain and simple. And now speaking to directly to Melissa Fireside, though I doubt she's watching this, I, as a taxpayer and someone who you are supposed to represent, ask that you resign and that you stop sucking on the teat of taxpayer money. Thank you.
So on March 7th, just days after this meeting and this 8-count felony indictment, very briefly into her career as an elected politician, Commissioner Fireside resigned.
And so after she resigned, you learned a lot more about this case, and it's pretty remarkable. Walk us through the details.
So we got these details from an unsealed search warrant and affidavit. And what it shows is that Commissioner Fireside defrauded her mother's elderly boyfriend of about $30,000. According to police, Fireside accessed these accounts of this guy named Arthur Patrone after she would take her mother to visit him at an assisted living facility in Lake Oswego where Patrone lived. The records suggest that Patrone's money was used to pay back this $29,000 loan that Democratic State Representative April Dobson, a Democrat who represents parts of Clackamas County, gave to Fireside. And back when the charges were first announced, Representative Dobson, issued a pretty lengthy statement saying, "Yeah, I was trying to help out, Fireside at a time she needed it. I gave her a loan, and it said that we wrote up a contract that said she would pay me back in a month, and she did." And then Dobson went on to say, in November, I was contacted by law enforcement, and that's kind of when she learned that the money she'd been paid back with came from, at least according to police, from this elderly man. And, this is a guy who doesn't make a lot of money. He worked at Safeway. He lives on $3,500 a month, fixed income. He had his wife had died, and his daughter had been given power of attorney, and so he had some kind of cognitive issues as well. And the indictment paints this picture where there's even recordings that the bank provided to law enforcement where you can hear, according to the search warrant, Fireside speaking to the older man, Mr. Patrone, and working to change his passwords and his information so that she's able to access the funds. Fireside has pleaded not guilty, and we did reach her for comment, and she said she didn't want to talk.
Okay, so Melissa Fireside ultimately resigns from the county board. And, I think it's worth mentioning here that she wasn't the only new member of the commission. I covered the chair's race, and Craig Roberts ousted Tootie Smith, who was a longtime politician, a former state lawmaker, a real known figure in the county. Basically, this has meant a lot of change in Clackamas County. Remind us why that matters.
Yeah, Clackamas County is Oregon's kind of purple county, right? This is a lot of back and forth. And, during the past decade, there's just been this push and pull on this 5-person board. It's worth noting, you had Republican Tootie Smith and Jeb Leblow turning the board to the right back in 2012. And they ran on a Stop Portland Creek platform. Years later, voters installed Democrat Jim Bernard as the chair, and he ousted Tootie. 4 years later, Tootie Smith was back, and she won a seat in 2020. And now we have Craig Roberts, longtime sheriff, a Democrat, ousting Tootie Smith, a Republican.
That is a lot of change. So what is next for Fireside, legally speaking?
Well, she has another upcoming court appearance. Really, this is a pretty serious criminal indictment. It's the kind of thing that carries penalties that could amount to time in prison. Obviously, we don't know. She gets her day in court, though, right? She has, as I said, pleaded not guilty. She has not wanted to talk about her, kind of her version of events. All that will play out in court. And so it is serious, but there's also a process.
How does her removal affect the political makeup of the Clackamas County Commission? And what happens next for the commission?
Well, so she was a Democrat, and that really changed the makeup of the commission, making it a majority Democratic commission. With her out, there's going to be a process to replace her. There's now 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. So whoever takes over is kind of going to be a swing vote.
Okay, Conrad, thank you so much for breaking this down for us.
You're welcome, Lauren.
This week's episode was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Nalene Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. In these uncertain times, we are certain you have questions about local politics. Maybe we can answer them. We would love to hear from you. Email us at opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. We will be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.